Hi, this is your host Apnil Bhartiya, and once again we have today with us Arpit Joshipura, GM and SVP of Networking, Edge and IoT at the Linux Foundation. Arpit, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. And today we are, first of all, going to get an update on, of course, LF networking, but also, more importantly, your partnership with Wireless Broadband Alliance. But since I talk to you a lot, but you wear so many hats, so I talk about a lot of other projects. So just give us an update on LF Broadband, the much bigger project which LF Broadband is part of, and then we'll talk about the wider ecosystem and the alliances.
I can give you a quick 1 minute history. 10 years ago, this whole disaggregation disruption happened, and that has reached the broadband access area. And broadband access typically used to mean GPON, so the passive optical networks. The speeds were 1.2 gig, 2.5 gig upstream, downstream. That went in with expansions of XG-PON and now XGS-PON. So for those of you who are familiar with broadband access and the need and the hungry businesses and enterprises and home users for bandwidth, speed, uplink, downlink, the broadband industry has taken a big leap into the disaggregated world. Okay, with that disaggregation comes the separation of hardware and software, and so LF Broadband is a sub-foundation within the Linux Foundation that is working on the open software for the disaggregated broadband solutions. Okay, and we have two projects on that, Volta and SIBA, which I can talk about later on. But fundamentally, it's the change of disaggregation that's driving the ability to have software and hardware separate. And there's a massive reason for that, which I can get into, on why this is so important. But that's the quick overview on LF Broadband. Historically, it came from the merge of ONF with the Linux Foundation about a year ago, and we split ONF into three projects: P4, LF Broadband, and Ether. And this is one of the most exciting fixed access broadband projects that's going on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I also want to talk about the innovation that is happening in the telco broadband space, because the fact, and we don't realize that, is that the whole we can talk about LLMs, we can talk about Gen AI, we can talk about cloud, but the thing is, internet or connectivity is the kind of, I don't know what, bloodline or heartbeat or highway. The amount of data we are generating, not only consuming but also pushing towards the servers and cloud, is growing, and every household has 4 or 5 devices. Everybody is using 4K content. There's a lot of stress. Talk a bit about how is the industry looking at, sometimes this stress can also become a bottleneck for innovation. How is the industry kind of evolving from your perspective? I mean, you and I have talked about how software defined networking actually opened the whole innovation. Otherwise, black boxes, proprietary, that was kind of a bottleneck there. So I just want to get a pulse of this whole ecosystem industry given the new use cases.
In the world of broadband, about 40% of broadband connectivities are to enterprises and another 40% to residential, roughly. And you're absolutely right that if there is bandwidth, we will use it. And that phenomena has worked for the last 20 years, right? From the DSL days now to the GPON and XGS-PON days, right? And so you've seen, here in the US or even in Europe, massive fiber expansions. Now, what are the key challenges that need to be solved? The number one is fiber expansion requirements, 5G, base stations, fixed wireless access. You can't just dig fiber through any property. So it's important to plan that properly. Along with that, because of disaggregation value, you can actually take advantage of the supply chain disruption. So right now, given that there are chip shortages or there are hardware vendor lock-ins that happen for a variety of reasons, including geopolitical, it's important to make sure that a vendor that has been deployed in the broadband by a carrier like a DT or a Turk Telecom or any they don't have to risk this massive investment of digging fiber and firing up all these access points with a single vendor. Okay, and so that's where open source and LF Broadband come in, because that's what they are solving. Okay, so that's where we are today. The rollout is going on. We have deployments in Deutsche Telekom was one of the early adopters in 2021, 22. Turk Telecom has massive number of live sites covered. Geo in the past has gone through this. So there's production deployments of open source broadband in a disaggregated manner, and it's just going to increase now given the current state of the environment.
And what role is Linux Foundation's Projects Foundation and LF Broadband playing in this, the ecosystem that you just explained to drive innovation, lower the cost of development, and make these technologies kind of more accessible to a lot of players?
Okay, so we at the Linux Foundation, like any other projects, we are the neutral home and host of bringing the community together to create shared innovation that gets deployed, used, and invested. So we all know why we exist. Specifically on LF Broadband, there are 6 problems that need to be solved, and that's what LF Broadband is solving. Number 1, it needs to be open. So open source and open interfaces, and future-proof with cloud-native architecture. So that's the fundamental premise behind which software needs to be written. The second is, has this been proven? And because most of the carriers will follow each other. And so Deutsche Telekom, who's on the board, Turk Telecom, who's on the board, supported by vendors like Radisys, Netsia, etc. They're all on the board, governing board of LF Broadband, and they actually have showcased this solution in a public setting. Now, the third thing that is extremely important on what we bring is the multi-vendor platform. So because of the disaggregation and because of the open source nature, it's a broad portfolio of ecosystem vendors, and you prevent lock-in. And this is, now if you get specific on the broadband part, you need multi-protocol, because it's I won't go into the details of it, but the architecture is quite separated and segregated with multiple protocols. And so you need a centralized network management system, centralized control plane, so like SDN, if you remember the OSS, BSS equivalent, to support existing and new, OLTs. OLTs are the units, optical units sitting in the network. So all of that is covered by our Project Volta and SIBA. And so right now in the industry, LF Broadband is the only open and disaggregated solution. Okay, everything else is proprietary. And from what we are told and what we have seen, the savings, to your question, roughly CapEx is about 20 to 40% lower, and OpEx is about 60% lower. So we're getting, the end users are getting benefits of an open and disaggregated system.
Now let's just go a bit deeper. You did mention that, and we briefly touched upon that, the partnership with the Wireless Broadband Alliance. What is the goal of this, and what would be the outcome of this alliance?
Yeah, so I'll probably bring it to a little bit broader than just the WBA. We have partnered with Broadband Forum and the Wireless Broadband Alliance. And it's a very simple philosophy. Both of these organizations, they do standards and specification work, and we implement that standard and specification in the open source community, right? So the goal in telecommunications, and specifically in broadband and beyond, whether it's mobile or fixed, is that standards and open source work in harmony. And so if a standard exists, let's implement it in code. If a code exists, let's implement it in standards, and then upstream it into standards so that the loop is quick and we don't have to wait for years and years for a solution. So what we are doing with Broadband Forum and Wireless Broadband Association is accelerating the development of these modular, disaggregated, multi-vendor broadband networks with open interfaces and open specifications. So it's essentially the equivalent of, saying that LF networking is working in harmony with, 3GPP or ORAN or ETSI or things like that. So same philosophy, but on the broadband side.
Perfect. Thank you. Now, of course, this is March. Tell me what's next in terms of broadband technologies, and of course, when you look at LF, networking, what are the things in your pipeline?
So I think we are focusing at the macro level on, three important things, right? Which is, I would say, horizontal across all projects, whether it's broadband, whether fixed broadband, mobile broadband, or edge or core, right? The first one obviously is the cloud native migration. Does the code that get created, packaged, delivered, and implemented as a set of microservices that can be, modularized and used and reused, right? And so the journey to cloud native, right, CNFs, applications, etc., is already happening first in the mobile broadband or in the mobile space, pretty much enabled by 5G, and is followed by the fixed broadband, right? So that's number one. The second big thing that's happening is the domain-specific AI that I think we've talked about for quite a bit is picking up steam. And what I mean by that is not all the end users, right, specifically telecommunication service providers or broadband access service providers, they need the LLMs to work on, close to the home. If there's a decent edge compute, you can run it on edge. If there's fiber, you can run it anyway. So what does the domain need from an AI perspective, right? And what we're seeing is there's a lot of, quote, RAG, fine-tuning, things like that, that is generally being pushed into the telecommunications network. There is a big move to share data sets that are coming from the service provider networks so that the models can be trained and they can pick up and learn. But it is all domain specific AI, okay? And then the third big thing is, depending on the area of technology, we keep ahead of the curve, right? So in broadband, from PON to XGS-PON. In mobile, 5G to advanced to 6G. And those things keep coming. And what Linux Foundation is trying to do is bring it all together as much as possible so that, solutions can be provided to the end users, and we can get rolling on the deployment as quickly as possible. Because, at the end of the day, open source equals speed of deployment equals innovation equals lower cost, right? It's no surprise or secret there, right?
Arpit, thank you so much for once again joining me today and of course talk about this alliance and a wider picture of broadband. Thank you so much for all those insights, and as usual, I look forward to chat with you again. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.